The pressure intensified when they started their operations.
The first two incidents happened before we actually took over the distribution centre. The third one happened about 3 months into it. And we'd taken the distribution centre over, and we'd taken over 30% of the buying, and we'd resisted all of the threats and warnings from the group. John Vasilopoulos, who had the responsibility of running the fresh produce for the state of Victoria for Coles, went home after work to his family on a Friday night. He was home when the front doorbell went about 9 o'clock in the evening, and this would have been in November. He went to the front door and he didn't open the door. He asked, "Who's there?" Yeah. A voice on the other side said, "Is that you, John?" He answered, "Yes." And he received 2 blasts of a shotgun. The intention was to kill him with two barrel blasts of a shotgun straight at your body. Yeah, and that would only be a matter of a foot away.
Amazingly, the man survived what was clearly a murder attempt. He was quickly sent overseas, out of harm's way. The Mafia returned their attention to the defiant Costa brothers. Coming up on Gangs of Oz, Frank Costa faces the decision of his life.
And the choices were $1 million in cash each year, and if that doesn't appeal to me, the other offer was a bullet, and that would be delivered post-haste.
Plus, Daddy's little girl. What happens when it's the daughter who's the chip off the old block? Frank Costa and Coles have taken on the Mafia, refusing to pay the 50 cents a case tax levied on fruit and veggies at the Victorian markets. 2 Coles managers have survived brutal attacks, and the Costa distribution centre has been firebombed. Frank's brother Anthony is the next to be threatened, and this time it was personal.
Say that again. No, you heard me. The answer's no.
He said he'd been approached by a spokesman for this group, come and seen him and told him to come down and see his brother and give his brother, and that was me. 2 choices, the offer. And the choices were $1 million in cash each year. Now I'm going back nearly 20 years ago, so $1 million in cash was a lot of money. And if that doesn't appeal to me, the other offer was a bullet, and that would be delivered post-haste. I'm no hero, but I thought, well, you do fight fire with fire. I wouldn't know where I would have got anyone to do this, not that I would have done it anyway. I said to Anthony, and it was easy for me because I'm down in an office and he's fronting these guys in the market. I said, you go back tomorrow morning and tell that guy if any member of our family, any member gets touched, 1 head of hair on his head, exactly double that will happen to that group, exactly double. And we'll start with this guy's family first. Now, I had no idea how I could do that, but you got to bluff him, and it worked. Anthony's a big burly bloke, a pretty tough looking bloke anyway. So we went and delivered that pretty strongly, and that stopped it.
Frank Costa's hardline did the trick. No one is sure if the extortion rackets are still operating, but some of the Calabrian Mafia figures involved in the 50 cent a case tax are still heavily involved in the Melbourne markets. The Italian Mafia is a family-run business, and it's not only the sons who follow in their father's footsteps. Pietro Antonio Sorello was a large-scale marijuana grower who fled the country when police raided one of his properties. His daughter Tony was left to tend the family business.
So the shipment's in.
Evidence and intelligence indicate that Tony Cirillo, the girl, the daughter, has stepped up to sort of take care of the family business in many ways. It was very unusual. I've never seen the father and daughter team operate like this before. Fathers and sons, multi-generational teams will step up and take over the business, but I've never seen a daughter step up and take the role of a father with such aplomb that Tony Cirillo did in this case.
Under the daughter's stewardship, the family business was booming. By Christmas 1999, she'd linked up with 2 male accomplices to help her diversify from cannabis into cocaine.
And if you grew up in the 60s and 70s and smoked a joint, the chances are it was grown in Mildura, Adelaide or Griffith, and that the same Calabrian Mafia organisation was distributing it. They basically had the stranglehold on that. When heroin came to the fore in the mid-80s, it was the Calabrians through Robert Trimboli that made the connection with the Mr. Asia gang that got into heroin. They've basically adapted to whatever the market is, and they realised in the mid-1990s that cocaine was the next big thing.
The gang decided to ship a small amount of cocaine from Germany, just a kilo for starters.
They hollowed out a Bible, which is quite a large sort of formal book. It was a sort of ceremonial Bible. It was about A3 size. Cut a section out of the middle. They had a kilo block of cocaine. Inserted that in the cavity inside. Filled the space with some of that expanding foam. Stuck the Bible down as pages together. Reinserted it, packaged it up. The problem arose was that the associate addressed the package to himself in Rose Bay, AUS, Australia, Oz. But being in Germany, they assumed it was Austria, and the package was sent to Austria instead.
Given the gang's close connection to cannabis king Pietro Antonio Sorello, police suspected the group was involved in drug trafficking. Investigators bugged their phones, but it wasn't until the cocaine-laden Bible went missing that the tapes yielded anything interesting. Suddenly, lines ran hot as the gang tried to locate the missing parcel.
When something goes bad, everyone talks quite freely, so that's exactly what happened in this occasion, which allowed us to identify the roles of the various players.
Now the courier's going to be in a half hour or so. Right over there.
An undercover cop delivered the parcel when it finally found its way to Australia.
Yes.
Definitely happy. Thank you.
We've then gone up to the flat, forced entry into the door. And as we've arrived, we can see the associate standing sort of frozen to the spot, holding $1,000 cash in his hand and shaking like a leaf.
Sorello's daughter and another man were arrested nearby. They were each jailed for 12 years.
Would have been smuggled into the United States.
Still to come on
The
Gangs of
Coast Guard
Oz.
showed off it.
Sorello Sr. sneaks home to Australia and gets back into the biz, in a big way. And how Aussie police brought down a major international crime syndicate. The Australian Mafia has strong links with criminal organisations around the world. These global connections allow the Italians to operate huge international drug rings worth billions of dollars. Surprisingly, one of the biggest was brought down by some solid detective work in Adelaide. It all began in 2000, when Australian Federal Police identified suspicious shipments of sandstone arriving in South Australia from Colombia. They were being sent to a gravestone maker named Pietro Antonio Sorello.
These slabs were about 6 tonnes in weight. It was just a massive, great big rock. It's nearly as big as a Volkswagen. And they came into Australia, they entered Melbourne, they were transported to Adelaide, where they finished up at the Mr. Sorello's address, warehouse.
When the police entered Sorello's name into their database, they got a surprise. Pietro Antonio Sorello had fled the country years earlier to avoid facing trial over a major cannabis plantation. Police arrested the gravestone maker over the outstanding warrant and searched his home.
They find a large amount of cash. It would be, $100,000 or so in one lump sum, or $200,000 in one lump sum, which heightens their suspicion. Then they walk into the garage. They see the trailer. Open the back of the trailer up, or they cut the lock of the back of the trailer, open it up, and there's a number of great big blue plastic containers. The investigators at the time, they opened those up and found a number of disc-shaped objects containing powder. The discs had half a kilo in weight, covered in plastic and with red gel around it. Initially, there's so much there, the officers didn't think that it was probably narcotics. Could have been fertiliser, there was so much there. They asked to bring out the forensic people. At that time, they tested it and it tested for positive for cocaine.
The cocaine discs have been covered in plastic and smuggled into Australia inside the sandstone blocks. For a small city like Adelaide, it was a good-sized haul. But those few discs were nothing compared to what police found as they continued searching the garage.
It was jubilation. They thought it was only about 20 kilos. So that's a lot of cocaine in itself. As the morning progressed, realised how much there was there, and it was 317 kilos.
When federal agents raided this house in Prospect, they got a lot more than they expected.
It was a huge bust, and it had a ripple effect around the world.
It was because of that bust in 2000 that the Australian Federal Police realised that he had connections with Italy, and that began a 4-year joint operation between the Calabrian area in Italy and the Federal Police, which culminated in January 2004 with 150 arrests worldwide. There was 15 premises raided in Australia, 8 of them in Victoria, 6 in Adelaide.
Police discovered that the Calabrians had used Italy as a distribution point for 11 major cocaine shipments from Colombia. Altogether, 11.3 tonnes of the drug found its way to destinations around the world, including Australia. That's a staggering $2 billion worth.
It really has only put a dent in the Calabrian Mafia, which just gives some idea of the global reach of this network, that a massive bust like that doesn't stop them.
But it certainly stopped Pietro Antonio Sorello. Like his daughter, he was sent to jail, in his case, for 20 years.
Tens of thousands of marijuana plants have been discovered. Some are up to 2 metres high and ripe for harvest.
While cocaine was turning some huge profits for the Calabrians, it didn't mean they'd kicked their marijuana habit. They were still growing large crops in remote areas around Australia. But now they were employing crop sitters with an Asian background.
Basically, they would recruit Southeast Asian persons from the Cabramatta and Fairfield area. And what they do is put them on a bus, a small minibus for instance, and they would drive them to the crop site. But they would drive them, leaving Sydney around midnight, late at night, and drive through the night to the property. That way, when they arrived at the site, they didn't know where they were and they couldn't identify the location of the crop.
If all went well, the crop sitters would make a tidy profit.
They were paid anywhere between $300 and $500 per day. There's one crop sitter in particular from a number of years ago that was paid in excess of $150,000 for 8 months' work.
In early 2003, the New South Wales Police got a tip that one well-known Calabrian crook was up to his old tricks.
Intelligence that we'd received suggested that Vince Canistra was the mastermind to some degree of large commercial-sized cultivation of cannabis, particularly in the western part of New South Wales.
The problem was that Western New South Wales is a huge place, and the cops didn't know exactly where the crop was located. Finding a few thousand marijuana plants was real needle in a haystack stuff. Then police caught a break. Canistra was stopped for speeding in the Mendoran area near Dubbo.
This point was a great breakthrough for us. It gave us a property in the area that we'd been informed.
After the break, what happens when the cops get between the Calabrian Mafia and their crop?
When I heard the bullets hitting the tree, I was in fear of my safety and my partner's safety.
Police have pinpointed the likely location of a large cannabis crop in Western New South Wales. But to be sure their intelligence is good, they must search the property on foot.
To search a property this size, it's not a matter of just driving up to a couple of 100 metres from the front door and getting out and walking into the bush. We had to park some kilometres away. We had to conceal our motor vehicles so they weren't observed by passing farmers, passing neighbours.